I like to describe your home inspector as the primary care doctor. You go to them, they give you kind of the once over, top to bottom, everything looks good.
And they'll let you know if you need to have it further inspected by a licensed roofer, HVAC person, electrician, or plumber.
Mhm.
And the reports are they're about 36 pages long with photographs.
Live love New Mexico, where dreams take flight. In this land of sunshine, our hearts ignite.
Welcome back, everybody, to Live Love New Mexico, the podcast where we get real about real estate in the Land of Enchantment. I'm Samuel Anderson, Marketing Director here at the Venturi Realty Group, a real broker, and your friendly navigator through today's conversation. If you're new here, go ahead and hit the follow button, subscribe on your favorite podcast app, and remember, you can always find us at welcomehomeabq.com online, where a team of real estate pros is ready to help you to navigate the market from curiosity to closing. Now, let's talk about home inspections. When joining me today, I've got Lisa Pino and Melissa Romero. Say hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello, everybody.
Lisa is back for her second time. Lisa, why don't you tell everybody how they can get a hold of you if they would like to work with you?
If you just look at the number below my photo there, you can reach me at that number directly, or you can also reach me at lpino@venturiteam.com.
Great. And Melissa, why don't you introduce yourself? It's your first time with the Live Love New Mexico podcast, but it's definitely not her first rodeo. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience? Melissa, go ahead and talk into this camera right here.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. Just like Lisa said, my information is going to be below. You can go ahead and call or email me, whichever's more convenient.
Thanks for being here, Melissa. Melissa has actually been with the team for years, but recently she just hit an anniversary. She had 10 years as a realtor, so she definitely knows what she's talking about. And so we're glad to have her here today talking about this important topic of home inspections, because it's a topic that can definitely be a little bit confusing if you don't know all of the basics of it the way that our real estate experts do. So let's jump right into our first segment, which is going to be the basics of home inspections, which we're calling, of course, Home Inspections 101. Lisa, I'm going to throw the first question to you. When we say home inspection, what does that actually include here in New Mexico?
Well, there's three primary inspections that most buyers will get on a home, and that is a full home inspection, which is the entire home, the roof. They look at the plumbing, they look at the electrical, light sockets, light bulbs, make fans are working, everything. They check it from top to bottom. If some additional inspections are needed, then the inspector will note that in the inspection report. Second one is a sewer scope, which looks at all of the plumbing underneath the house and all the way to the main, until it ties into the main area at the road. And then the last one is a pest and dry rot and termite inspections. Those are the three primary. There are additional ones that a buyer can get depending on what their comfort level is. And we provide a list of all of those.
Awesome. And Melissa, is there anything that you can add to that buyers or sellers who've never been through this before should be looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the important thing to remember about a home inspection is the job of the inspector is to point out things that are maybe wrong with the home. So a lot of times a buyer starts this process, you just found your dream home, and then you go to the inspection, and it feels like the inspector is just cutting your home down that you so much love. But in reality, the benefit of that inspection is so that you know what you're walking into, and then you can potentially negotiate some of those repairs to get done by the seller. And then on the flip side, the seller can have a pre-listing inspection done so that they're aware of maybe some deficiencies with their home that they weren't aware of to start with, and that there's not any surprises for them when that time comes.
Excellent. And just to clarify, Melissa, because I know you had kind of wanted to make this point when we brought up the topic, pass or fail on a home inspection, is that even a thing?
No, there's no such thing as a full home inspection being pass or fail. There are lists of things that an inspector will point out, and maybe as a buyer, you might have something that's a complete non-negotiable, but everything can be fixed. There's nothing in a home that is completely unavoidable to getting fixed. It's just going to take a little bit of time or money potentially. But there's no such thing as a pass or fail with a full home except for a septic inspection. Those truly do have a pass or fail. And the other one that you could, I guess, consider being a pass or fail is a termite inspection. So you either have termites or you don't.
Great. So, on that note, when we talk about an inspector that is just pretty much their job is to look for things that are wrong. Melissa, you made a great comparison earlier about how your inspector is similar to like your primary caregiver. Go ahead and tell us that analogy a little bit.
Yeah. So I like to describe your home inspector as the primary care doctor. You go to them, they give you kind of the once over, top to bottom. Everything looks good. Here's a few things to keep in mind to keep you on the right track. But if an inspector sees a leak behind the sink, they could suggest having a mold inspection done. So I like to relate that to being like sending you to a cardiologist, someone who's a specialist in that department. Because a home inspector is not a licensed roofer, electrician, or plumber, but they do have the general knowledge of all of those things. But they are not the licensed person who can tell you exactly what's wrong or how to fix it.
And that's a good point. And they'll let you know if you need to have it further inspected by a licensed roofer, HVAC person, electrician, or plumber.
Mhm.
And the reports are they're about 36 pages long with photographs. So it's easy for you to go back through that with your buyer, or if the seller decides to get one, and determine, what you want to negotiate with the other party
Mhm.
with regards to moving forward with that contract.
That's great. So, what I kind of wanted to like to move on to is kind of the legality and the requirement of inspections themselves. A lot of people can go into inspections thinking that they are literally required. Melissa, what inspections are actually mandatory here in New Mexico?
The one that is 100% mandatory would be a septic inspection. Even cash or a loan to transfer from one person to another, a septic inspection has to be done through the state needs the proof that it's a working septic. And then it kind of depends on what's written within the contract. A VA loan is usually needs a well, if there is a well on the property, and termite. But those are really it. A full home is not required, just definitely recommended.
Hmm. And also too, there's sometimes you're negotiating and maybe the house is quite popular and has multiple offers. If you feel and obviously consulting with your real estate broker with regards to whether you would not ask for any repairs, because that's a negotiation piece in that whole process. You could forego asking for any repairs. But one of the things you're still going to want to do is have a home inspection, those three primary inspections, just for your own knowledge. So you know what you're getting into because it is one of your biggest purchases.
That's great. And since we're on the topic of not necessarily needing all inspections, Lisa, what are some of the most recommended but not necessarily required inspections that buyers should still strongly consider?
It depends on each buyer. Each buyer is going to be different. Some that I have seen come up more often lately are radon inspection and mold inspections. I've been seeing more of those. Those aren't the typical three, though, that I said are the home inspection, pest and dry rot, and the sewer line inspection. And one thing I wanted to point out too is if you do have a septic system and the septic system is being inspected, that does not cover the lines, the sewer lines under the home, nor the lines to the septic. So you still want to have a sewer inspection along with the septic inspection. I don't think we mentioned that yet. But those are two, but we give you a list of the different types of inspections that a buyer can get, and it's up to them to determine what they would like to do based on after viewing the home and talking with your licensed realtor.
I think one of the things to keep in mind now that we're getting in the warmer season is during a radon inspection, the home has to be closed up
Mhm.
for 24 to 48 hours. I can't remember exactly
48, I believe it is.
48 hours. So it does become a little bit uncomfortable for a seller who's living in it because they cannot be running the swamp cooler or have doors and windows just open, getting that cross breeze in. The other one that can be a little bit uncomfortable is a radiant heat. So the radiant heat goes through the floor, put out the heat coming from the ground. That has to be on at least 24 hours before you have a inspection done. And that gets hot as well because basically you're running a heater in 80, 90 degree weather. But it makes sense to get done, especially for a buyer to do it. and a seller does not have the right to tell a buyer no. So any inspection that a buyer requests, the seller has to comply with.
Accommodate, yeah.
That's great to know. So, just kind of on that same note, since we're talking about buying and selling with home inspections, what about new constructions? What are some of the benefits of getting your new home inspected? And is there any reason why you wouldn't do it right when you buy it?
Yeah, I always recommend having a sewer scope and a full home. With new construction, the wood has already been treated for termites, so a termite inspection is not going to be necessary at that time. But a sewer scope and the full home are always recommended. The benefit of doing those, I recommend doing those around the 8 or 9 month mark. And the reason is because typically a brand new home will have a 1 year warranty, and so during that time, if you get an inspection done around the 8 or 9 month, you could add any of those repairs that need to get done to the list to get taken care of before your warranty expires. The sewer scope is just a good idea to get done to make sure that it was been properly connected. And I think Lisa made a comment earlier about the importance of it because some debris during the building process can get in the sewer line. And that's something that honestly I hadn't thought of that as being an important reason, but that makes a lot of
And then
sense.
you also mentioned, things are going to shift because it's new
Mhm.
construction. So you might have an offset in the line. So you're going to want to know that. And so that inspection is going to be important.
Great. And Lisa, you had mentioned earlier about even things like your driveway perhaps were poured at a time when 8 months from now it might set and you might have a giant crack in the middle of your driveway. And getting that done, as Melissa said, at the eighth or ninth month still gives you the chance to be covered by the home warranty, from what I understand. Is that correct?
Yes, I had a client that bought a property and they started seeing flaking in the driveway. And that was later on right before their year mark. And so the builder corrected that. So sometimes when they're in the building process, they're on deadlines as well, and they may try to pour that concrete in weather that's not sufficient for that to set correctly.
Awesome. So let's move on to another segment. We're going to talk about some special cases. We're going to talk specifically about well and septic and a little bit more about new construction. So this is where New Mexico can get a little more specialized, so to speak. Lisa, start with well and septic and give us some more information about what buyers should know when looking at homes that aren't connected to city utilities.
Okay. So typically in a typical transaction, these are typical things that just each contract's going to be different based off of how much interest there is in the property. So like the full home, the pest and dry rot, and the
Full home
the
termite
full
and
home,
sewer.
the pest and dry rot, and the sewer line are some typical inspections. Then there's the and those are typically covered by the buyer, usually paid by the buyer. The well and septic are usually covered by the seller. Now, they may be covered by the buyer depending on the interest in the property. But the well and septic, those usually run anywhere from $600 to $700 for each inspection. They're good for 180 days, so a seller isn't going to want to do those until they've secured a buyer. And on the well inspection, you're looking to make sure all the components are working properly. You also want to know how many gallons per minute that well is producing. And then the other thing is you'll do a potability test to make sure there's no bacteria or anything in the water. And then the septic, as I had mentioned, is, and one important part, and I think Melissa will talk about not pumping your septic prior to the inspection, but is to make sure that there's no cracks in the septic. And as I mentioned earlier, you're still going to want to have a scope done to scope the lines to the home and under the home and to the septic.
Absolutely. I think it's important. I had a seller one time, and the important part about a septic tank inspection is to make sure that it's holding the liquid and there's not any cracks within the tank. But pumped the tank thinking that they were helping the buyer by giving him a fresh tank. But in reality, it wasn't great because the septic company needs to make sure that the tank is able to hold liquid. So it was able to get worked around. They had to fill it up with a hose and
Mhm.
it worked out. But it is something to keep in mind that do not pump a tank if you're going to sell, just to make sure that that is able to still function.
Yeah.
The other thing that we hadn't really talked about, since we're kind of talking about stuff in rural areas, a little bit of septic and wells, mobile homes. That manufactured home, mobile home, you do a foundation inspection to make sure that it's attached
Mhm.
appropriately to the foundation of the home. And that's going to be important. They'll go underneath, climb underneath the home and make sure that it's tied down appropriately.
Mhm. And the straps do become loose. I had that recently on one where those had to be reattached. The other thing in the septic, in the inspection, that is the pumping the septic is figured into that inspection price. So it's not something you have to do additionally. It comes with the inspection.
If you're finding today's episode useful, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, leave us a review, and share it with somebody who's getting ready to buy or sell here in New Mexico. And remember, when you're ready to make a move, visit us anytime at welcomehomeabq.com. That's where you'll find Lisa, Melissa, and the rest of our team ready to guide you to your new home. Let's move on to our next segment, and we're going to do a little light game that we like to call Real or Not. And I'm going to read off a handful of supposed home inspection facts. And you tell me, is this actually something we hear, or is it something that is totally made up? Okay, Lisa, I'm going to start with you.
Fire away, Sam. Fire away.
Alrighty. Is this true or false? Inspectors can move furniture to check behind it during an inspection.
False. So inspectors are there to inspect everything. And Melissa had a good point. We were talking earlier. You want to make sure that inspectors have access to the HVAC system, to the hot water heater, to the electrical panel, because they will have to look at that. So when sellers are packing their boxes, you want to leave a path so that an inspector can get to that, because they won't move your stuff around to get to it. They also won't move furniture. The other thing is you need to make sure you have water on and that your hot water heater's lit. They won't light that because if it's not lit, they don't know the reason that it isn't lit and will not attempt to do so. So you want to make sure everything is working prior to that inspection to avoid any delays. And anything that is so, if there was something that is under a rug or furniture, that is something that a seller probably needs to disclose so that it's not a surprise to the buyer when they do their final walkthrough.
Perfect. Melissa, anything to add to that?
No, I think that's a really good point. It's just making sure that an inspector has access to everything they need to have checked.
So, Melissa, that means that the next question is for you. And I'm going to ask you another true or false. If the water heater is over 10 years old, you must replace it before closing.
False. If the main thing that an inspector is looking for is it functioning. It might be old, but that's one of the things that a buyer needs to keep in mind, that it might be towards the end of its life, but if it's working, it does not need to be replaced. There are different requirements now that a water heater has to have earthquake straps and an expansion tank. If it doesn't have that on there, that doesn't mean it's not working properly. It just means that it's not up to current code, which changes quite often.
Mm-hmm. And some people will get caught up on if it's not green tagged.
Right.
And we know that a lot of homeowners will install their own hot water heaters. So it's dependent on talking with your license agent and having that discussion on whether that's an issue. And the hot water heater might even look brand new and still not have a green tag on it.
Well, and even a licensed contractor can install a water heater. It's not green tagged. The city has to
The green tag it. Mhm.
But that's a whole day. They're like, we'll be there from 8 to 5. And so someone's got to sit in the house because they don't give you a 20-minute phone call.
So on that note, I do see here that even though it's not required, it may still be noted on the inspection report. Now, just kind of explain to everybody what exactly that means. Obviously, you've said that inspectors are looking for something wrong. What happens if they note it on the report? What's it going to say? What's it going to make people think that they should do?
I think it kind of goes depending on your inspector. Some inspectors put in there, it's the end of its expected
life, yeah.
life, which is hard because is it somebody who never once flushed that hot water heater and it's full of calcium and isn't functioning properly? Or is it someone who really did take good care of it and had it serviced and flushed it every year? I don't think that's a great thing to put in there because I think buyers sometimes get a little bit nervous with hearing that. But really, is there an expected lifespan on anything? I mean, those dishwashers from the 60s probably work better than the dishwashers we have today.
And you'll see that labeled on HVAC systems, AC systems. But that is why that report is so long. And that's something that you'll go over with your licensed agent. And everything's negotiable. But you want to pick your battles in that you want, when buyers are asking for repairs, you want to ask for the major mechanical things such as roofing, heating, cooling. If they're needing to be replaced, repaired, or replaced or repaired, and discuss that with your licensed agent, and that you can talk through that, get estimates on things, and then negotiate with the seller if you feel you need to have those things done.
The other thing I was thinking you can do, there's home warranties.
Yes,
So a
good
home
point.
warranty for just like new construction, a home warranty is for the first year. You can buy a home warranty for a home that's already older, and that warranty covers a lot of those things for the first year. So if you're concerned that maybe this hot water heater is the end of its life, that warranty will get you through the first year, and then you could always extend that warranty.
Yes, that's a great point.
Okay, Lisa, next question. You don't need to inspect a condo.
False. You should inspect a condo, but you don't need to. Or any home for that matter.
Right.
Well, and kind of go into that about, first of all, why would somebody want to inspect a condo? What would be covered under that? What would be something that they would be required to fix and so on, since a condo is a kind of a unique setup where it's more in
Compact.
compact.
Well, first of all, you're going to want to know what the HOA covers. Sometimes the HOA will cover the stucco, the roof, and some other things like that. Not all HOAs cover that. So, you're going to want to have someone go up on the roof and take a look at that. You're going to want to have them look at the stucco to make sure there's not parts of the stucco that are showing where their water can intrude in there and damage the wall behind that. The other thing is you're going to want to check and make sure everything's working in that condo appropriately. A full home inspection is worth it in that they check every light, down to every light socket. They open and close your windows to make sure the counterbalances are working correctly. So there's a lot of things that normal person might not go in there and do. And so just for your own peace of mind, because like we've said, it's your biggest purchase.
Just because you may not own the exterior of the building, you're still owning the interior part of
Mhm.
that. So that is still you're going to be your responsibility to maintain and take care of and preserve for your future.
And that's a good point because you could have a leak in let's say you're in the upstairs unit and you have a leak in your toilet or whatnot. You'll be responsible for everything, all that damage that's inside of that home.
Absolutely. And the HOA does still typically cover the stucco and the roof,
Mhm.
but having the report, I've had it where I've sold a condo, and having the report that we can send over to the HOA was really helpful in getting that kind of jump started so that the seller can start the process to request it, because we all know that sometimes HOAs take a little bit longer to get things going, and they have it just to get that ball rolling.
Mhm.
Great. Alrighty. So our last little myth that we're going to bust today, true or false, Melissa, you can't negotiate repairs if the inspection is bad.
That's false. You can negotiate repairs down to the smallest thing up to the biggest thing. Like I've said before, all repairs are fixable. You can fix anything. It just depends on how detailed you want to be. I think Lisa just said the biggest things you want to focus on are the plumbing, heating, cooling, electrical, and the roof, the big ticket items. I tell buyers, you're not buying something that's brand new. So if the outlet cover's cracked, you have to take some ownership of some of the things, a little like the cosmetic parts of it, that we just have to kind of understand that you're not buying something that's brand new. You get to put your own spin on it that way.
And the major mechanical are what are going to cost you the most amount of money within your first year of home ownership when you're adjusting to that new payment. So those are the more important things than a cracked tile or a cracked outlet cover.
Absolutely.
That's a great point. And Lisa, earlier you had also made a great point about not only are you able to negotiate repairs, often negotiations start with the inspections, and using inspections and possible repairs. Tell us a little bit about how those can be used as negotiation tools.
Well, if you've got you want to try and keep everybody happy, both on the selling side and the buying side. Obviously, buyers, you're going to have to determine what's very important to your buyers and fight for those more important things. I often tell them, I will tell you that these are more important than these items. I'm going to ask for what you want to ask for, but these are going to cost you the most amount of money. And those are the ones that we really want to work with the sellers on getting those approved. And I also educate sellers the same way. Buyers are coming in and they're putting down quite a bit of money. And so they may not have a lot of funds to spend on fixing things in that first year. So we want to make sure that those major mechanical things. So like Melissa said earlier, if a seller does do an inspection ahead of time, because typically buyers will pay for that, but if they do that because they have a concern, they can fix. My recommendation would be to fix those major things and leave some of those littler things that a buyer may or may not be concerned with.
And a lot of times I have found that people are like, oh, my uncle's a contractor. He can come over and take care of
Exactly.
A, B, and C. So this isn't as important, but the roof is really important to
Hmm.
me. And somebody else may not care about the roof because their dad's a roofer, but they need to worry a lot about the electrical.
Right.
I had someone, he worked from home, had a lot of computers. So the electrical was one of his most important things to him because he needed to work from home and move in and immediately be able to get up and running.
Yeah, that's why we spend a lot of time getting to know our clients.
Yeah.
Because that's how you know what's going to be important to them and how you're going to best represent them in a transaction.
Perfect. And I just want to wrap this segment up with just one last little tidbit on this same subject. Why don't you, if you could, guys could both kind of give us some examples of how you can use repairs that need to be done with inspections to benefit you in the negotiation for the price.
Oh,
Oh.
well, if you're in a competitive situation where you've got 3 or 4 buyers they're wanting the same home, and I've gone in to see that home with you and I'm like, this is a pretty clean home. You could do this. You could waive your inspections. I mean, not waive your inspections, I'm sorry. You could forego repairs and say that you're going to purchase the home as is, but that you will be doing inspections for buyer's knowledge only. So you would still have inspections because you still want to know what you're purchasing. And maybe the roof did come up, and that's an expense that you're not willing to forego. It would give you a way out, but I often tell buyers, try to negotiate with the seller because they may still be willing to do something rather than walk away from that transaction, and let them make that decision at that time. But that's another way of getting maybe an offer accepted where you can be a little bit more competitive.
That's great. That's great clarification to know that. I think there's a big misconception on the people who have never done it before into thinking that because an inspection says XYZ needs to be repaired, all of those things need to be done before the sale can be done. So thank you guys for clarifying that that's not actually the case. Alrighty, so let's wrap up today's episode and end things the way we always do with a little bit of food because I myself am always hungry. And when this drops on a Monday, we're going to have a whole week of meals that we're going to have to plan. So, Melissa, where are you sending folks this week for a great meal and maybe a cocktail?
I just went to Fiesta Azul Taco House. No, Fiesta Azul Tequila House. Even better.
Mm-hmm.
It was amazing. It's on Montgomery in Louisiana. The margaritas were great. I had a blueberry margarita, so good. And ceviche. My husband had some. We kind of just did a bunch of appetizers, honestly. We
To
did
try everything
queso.
out.
Yeah. It was so good. And we're going to definitely go back. The ambiance was great. The decorations were wonderful. Food was good.
Great. Any recommended dishes?
The tacos look amazing, and I'm definitely gonna go back for the tacos, but I had the ceviche, and we
Is
had
that good? I love
so
ceviche.
good and
Okay.
fresh. And we had queso fresco,
Yum.
Speaking my language.
Choose-
And Lisa, what's your go-to spot right now?
Well, I'm going to send some people over to Juniper Steakhouse. It's located in the Santa Ana Casino over there in Bernalillo. And if you want a great steak, that's wonderful. I recently had the scallops there and loved them. Fresh baked potatoes, salad. It was delicious. And they have a nice little bar ambiance. And so I sat in there, whether, have a cocktail or a soda or a tea, whatever, and enjoy your meal in there. And that was wonderful. And then if you like to partake in gambling, there's a little bit of those festivities there too.
Is that upstairs where it's got the views?
No, that's another one that they have.
Okay.
but I like juniper.
Got it.
Awesome. And any specific dishes there?
Well, I had the scallops and they were delicious. And
Scallops.
their baked potatoes are always so fresh. So that was my go-to that day.
Sounds great. Yeah, I'm going to be hungry until next week when we get our next round of recommendations. Thank you all for that. So that wraps up our episode this week of Live, Love, New Mexico. A big thank you to Lisa Pino and Melissa Romero for helping us demystify the inspection process a little bit. Of course, there's obviously more to know. And so if you ever need more information, you can get a hold of either Lisa or Melissa. Melissa, why don't you go ahead and remind everybody how they can get a hold of you again?
You can go ahead and call me or email me with my information below. I am happy to talk to you. Also, Facebook or Instagram. I'm on there as well.
Yeah, that's true. Melissa's got a great little series that she does every week called Fun Fact Friday. So follow her on Instagram to check that out. Lisa, well, how can people get a hold of you?
Ditto, same way as they can Melissa. It's located below. I'm also on Facebook, book, and Instagram. I don't have a little blog like Melissa, but I'm always accessible and ready to help.
Great. So don't forget to check out our other podcast, the Albuquerque Real Estate Pod. New episodes every week on YouTube and everywhere that you get your podcast. You can find new episodes of Live, Love, New Mexico every week here on welcomehomeabq.com and Welcome Home ABQ on YouTube. Until next time, live well, love where you live, and we'll see you around New Mexico.
Thanks for watching the video all the way to the end. We appreciate you. And please click subscribe. We'll keep you updated on what's going on with real estate in the Albuquerque area and New Mexico, and of course, across the entire country. Have a great one.